Welcome to the What's Your Weird Story podcast.
Everyone has at least one good story.
And some of us have stories that are just to the left of normal.
We're interested in the ones that push the boundaries of what we can perceive.
Stories that defy explanations.
Stories with an air of mystery.
Stories we might not share
for fear of being thought of differently.
But don't worry, we're all friends here. So, what's your weird story? Hey, welcome to the What's Your Weird Story podcast. This is episode 9, I believe, Barry. How you doing today?
Really good. I am really looking forward to getting into Emily's stories. She has a really fascinating story behind her life, really. All these things that keep happening to her.
Yeah.
Mind-blowing.
Yeah, we've got Emily today, as Barry mentioned. She is a friend of mine from when I was at East Carolina University in Goldsboro, North Carolina. We actually, as she's going to tell in her first story, or one of her first stories, we actually shared the same apartment in a house, not at the same time. But I moved in right after she moved out, and she'll go into reasons why. But that was a fun story. That was the initial story when she contacted me. That was the initial story that she had to share.
Well, something tells me that she was paying attention a little bit more than you were at the time.
It's quite possible. It's very possible.
Would it be fair to say she was more connected with the earth at that time, maybe a little more grounded?
Yeah. We can, but she'll get into that, and we'll touch on that a little bit during the interview as well.
But she also had that story about one of the houses that she lived in Los Angeles that some weird things kept happening at.
Yeah, she's got that. She lives in LA. She's out there now, and she has some stuff. And she actually sent us some video, and I'm going to try to see if we can post that on our places as well. But if not, she describes it very well in the interview. And she's a great interview. She is. Just gives us all the information, and we had to slow her down because, man, she got right to it too.
I couldn't hit the record button quick enough. She just was, as soon as she picked up, man, she was all in it, and I was just like, okay, we got to just roll. We're just gonna roll it, and we're gonna see what happens because she moves quick. But she's just such a fun person, and it was a real fun interview, and just happy that I got to meet her.
Yeah. It was great connecting with her because she was a cool girl back then, and she's still a cool girl now. So let's get into it. Joining us today on the What's Your Weird Story podcast is Emily. Emily, what's your weird story?
Well, hi. Thank you for having me on. Just want to preface this by saying, there's a lot of this stuff, the weird stories that you feel absolutely cuckoo banana pants talking about openly. But luckily, with a lot of these, I wasn't the only person experiencing them, so you don't feel so crazy. The apartment in uni where you and I both lived at different times, our next door neighbor experienced things at the same time that I did. So, and neither of us necessarily wanted to bring it up to the other one, but there was one evening, a few months after we moved in, we were both sitting on our steps, having a few beers, which loosened us up to mention things to each other, and we realized that we were both experiencing some bizarre happenings in our homes. So the house was, it was an older home that we actually went and did some research on it after we were experiencing stuff. This is back in the 90s, so we had to go to the library.
Yes.
And we found that it was built around a time where there were a lot of revivals that went on in Greenville, North Carolina, a lot of them. And they mainly took place at the fraternity house that was behind us. Oh God, I hated those guys. Maybe that explains their behavior.
So what time frame was that again? What
It was I believe it was around the 30s and 40s.
Okay.
I think
That would seem right as far as a lot of the traveling revival and stuff like that being part of our culture, the stuff that was happening in the world, that like in Depression era stuff, where there was people,
exactly
doing stuff like that.
So, what started happening was the first experience was the way the house was laid out, it was 3 apartments on the ground floor of the house, one in the front, one in the middle, one in the back of the house, and a little tiny studio apartment in the upstairs of the house. I was in the back, and so I had a large picture window in the living room and a window above the sink that looked out into the backyard. The living room looked out into the driveway.
And that was sorry to interrupt, that was also the same apartment that I had.
Yeah.
So it was a tiny, tiny little kitchen too. So
weird kitchen.
Yeah.
And it had this bonkers huge room in the middle of it.
Yeah.
Like 15-foot ceilings. Yeah. And then the bedroom thing was almost an afterthought addition with big wood paneling. Very cozy. So when I first moved in, my neighbor's kitchen, it was a weird setup. Her kitchen was completely separate from her apartment. It was off a hallway that was also the stairs and the entrance for the upstairs neighbor. And it was next to the tiny living room. And I would smell food burning all the time. And I just thought she was not a very good cook. And she mentioned to me, so that when we first started talking about it, I brought it up to her that I'd been smelling burning. And it wasn't her. She then mentioned to me, she'd grown up on the Outer Banks, where there is, I guess, a lot of activity. I don't know if it's because of the location, because of the weather or something, because of the history of the Outer Banks. But she'd grown up being used to having weird experiences. And so it really didn't bother her as much as it did me. And she just very calmly and frankly told me that our apartments were joined by a large closet that used to be a hallway that they'd put a false back in. She would wake up at night because she was woken by a little girl in a white nightgown walking down the hallway past her bedroom room from the direction of my apartment. So that's
a little disconcerting.
That was a little disconcerting. But it wasn't, I wasn't seeing anything in my apartment. So I just thought, well, maybe it's just her part of the house. But the burning smell didn't go away. And I lived there for all of the summer. I lived there from July through December. And I was dating a guy who was in a band.
Those guys are the worst, man.
Oh, totally.
He was the drummer. No offense to drummers out there.
That's great.
And it was a jam band, which I have ethical issues with. So I would tell people that it was a funk jazz fusion band. They lived on a school bus. Right?
What could you name the band? Okay.
Not even going to give him time.
Tell me off air.
I'll tell you off air. Okay. But yeah, so I was living my best life at this time. So I would take off most weekends to go and stay on a school bus. So what I would do is, because we were on the East Coast in the Carolinas, we would have a lot of big storms during the summertime. And it was because of the humidity mostly. So because the house was older, I would unplug all of my main electrics. I would unplug the television, the microwave, things like that, just in case there was a power surge, so I wouldn't burn the house down. Mm-hmm. And so I started noticing there was a gal that lived, I forgot, there's a little studio in the back garden that used to be a garage. So I was good friends with the gal that lived there. I'm a next door neighbor. And I went away for a few weekends in a row, and I noticed that they were being kind of upset with me when I would come back, and I didn't know why. And finally they said to me, why haven't you been answering the door on the weekends? And I said, well, I haven't been home. I've been out of town. They're like, no, we know that you've been there. They were seeing through the blinds in the living room the flickering of the television. And they were seeing the silhouette of someone standing in the window of the kitchen.
What?
I wasn't home.
Whoa.
So that I didn't, that really kicked everything off for me. My cordless phone would suddenly just go static, and I'd never had problems with it before. My television, on a few occasions, it turned itself off. And it kind of ramped up to the point that I started then in the back room where the bedroom was, I started smelling cold cream and roses, both of which I didn't have in the apartment. And I'm not.
Those are distinct,
right,
and very different smells.
Yeah.
Very different smells, and I didn't have that stuff in the house. Now, I'm not an artist. I have no experience with this stuff. But occasionally the guy that I was dating would come and stay with me, and he was a painter. And so he painted with oils. And so I had numerous paintings of his that he'd done hanging in the apartment. And I came home one day, and it was one of those things that you walked in the door and something didn't feel right. Like the hairs on the back of your neck kind of stand up. And for some reason, I walked through the apartment straight into the area where his paintings were. And one of them was it was almost weeping. The oil had started to come out. It was just that clear type, almost amber colored oil. And it was dripping down the painting. And it was one that had been done a few months prior. So I knew that it had cured. It wasn't. It was in the fall. It was around September, October. And I lost my shit. And I called one of our mutual guy friends, and he came to pick me up, and I stayed at his house for a few days because I was afraid to go home.
Okay,
Adam, so you're an artist too.
Yeah.
What would have you ever seen something like that happen?
What I was going to say, Barry, is that I am an artist, and although I'm a painter, and I don't use oils very often. Everything I know about oils, that basically that doesn't really happen. I don't really know of that as a frequent kind of thing. Now, again, I could be wrong because I don't use oils a lot, but that's bizarre. That doesn't sound right to me. Yeah. If it's been dry for months, I know that oils do take a long time to dry, no doubt about it. And there, sometimes, different types of pigments and different types of oil in the making of the paint could take maybe years, depending on how thick the paint is. But for it to bead out like that and to drip, that's part of the thing to me, that doesn't seem like that's a normal thing at all. So that's bizarre.
That is weird.
When I went in the apartment and I saw that, I just did not feel safe in my own home. I was terrified. We did find, when we were doing research, that there'd been a fire there. So we don't know during that time that there was the revival stuff. We did find out there had been a fire in the house. So one of the things that our neighbor and I were wondering is, did someone die in a fire in the house? But the records, we couldn't find out if anyone had there, but we were able to put in the address and find out what we did. Wow. And because there were newspaper articles about the revival, and there were newspaper articles about the fire, but no deaths or anything that we found.
Well, that's the fire. Excuse me, could be the cause of that burning. The smell of the burning food or whatever, the burning smell. That's
and also possibly of the oil coming out of.
This is true because heat would drive it out. I mean, that would wow.
So I didn't know if when you were living there, if you experienced strange smells.
I honestly,
other than cat wee from my cat that used to be on everything.
How long before, was it right after you moved out, Adam, that she moved in, or
no, other way around.
Oh,
I moved in after.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
And here's the thing. I don't recall anything unusual or out of or anything like that while I was there. And that's why when you told me, though, that place we lived that at separate times, that it was haunted, I was like, what? I don't recall anything. I don't remember having anything weird happen while I was there that I would say this is ghostly, this is anything like that. So, we talked, when we were talking to Bucky, we talked about how, and Emily, how you talked before we started about, openness. If, is it to where you are open to, if you're open to seeing things, does it happen? Or, I mean, I think, yeah, it would, but like, maybe are you predisposed to experience these kind of things where your brain is attuned to where you can experience a different frequency, or where you can experience like sightings or smells or anything like that? Because I've never had anything that I would call supernatural.
Right.
And I've talked about how I've seen UFOs and I've seen stuff like that, but I've never seen a ghost. I've never seen anything like supernatural that I can really say, this I would say is a ghost or spirit or something from beyond that doesn't have a kind of, the normal kind of thing. So that's what's so wild to me, is that I lived in the same place right after you did, right after you probably moved out because you were freaked out. But I had
I managed to graduate, which I was really shocked at.
I had nothing. Enough there. Now, granted, also it was ECU. It was so these were party days.
Yeah.
So I was having a lot of fun, but still, no experiences like that whatsoever that I can recall.
Well, I would say that, and it's funny you bring that up. I like you said, it was a party school. I was a terrible student because my emphasis was on party. Which is why it took me 5 years to graduate, 5.5 if we're going to be technical. So I went to summer school that summer, and that fall semester, I locked myself in the apartment and didn't go out to parties anymore. I would have a beer every now and then, but I just started ghosting people essentially because I finally had the correlation between the two that I was failing out of school because I was plastered 95% of the time. I don't know if maybe suddenly having that clarity of self and not being, 3 sheets to the wind most of the time suddenly just made me more aware of my surroundings. I don't know.
You were saying before we started that you had some emotions that would. Is this from the same place? Like you'd have some emotional. Okay, this is a different one.
No. Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, I didn't.
No, okay.
I wasn't sure. So Adam, you didn't experience any of that stuff, and
not that I'm aware of.
I'll tell you right now, because I there was a time in my life when I dated someone that was into sort of experiencing those types of things. You can work on it. You can try to open yourself up and be receptive to those types of things. But I think most people have a sort of an innate, natural ability to, experience those things, and then I think you can hone some of that,
Hey guys, don't forget to follow us on all of our social media platforms. We're very 21st century. We're on Instagram at What's Your Weird Story. That's WATSYER Weird Story. We're at Twitter. We're at What's Your Weird. We got a Facebook page. It's the What's Your Weird Story podcast Facebook page. Just remember that our your is your because we're folksy. And we also have a www.whatsyourweirdstory.com. That's www.whatsyourweirdstory.com. That's for all of your social media platforms. And those are ways you can contact us and set up an interview if you want to be part of the show. So look us up.
You know, I've lived in LA now for 11 years, and there's a lot of hippy-dippy woo-woo shit. Yeah. Yep. But one of the things I have learned about is the whole thing about, I guess, being an empath.
Yeah.
I guess. And one of the things that even my mum has commented on since I was a kid is that I feel things a little too deeply. I take every single person's emotion almost feels like it's coming at me, and I take on a bit of it.
Yeah.
And I wonder if because of that, I'm more susceptible or open to this.
That would make a lot of sense, because if you're, because you do feel it more. You do have a bit of a broader connection and a deeper kind of thing with yourself, but also with, how feeling other people's being able to feel what other people are feeling. Empathy is something we absolutely need more of in the world. We would understand each other more and we get along better, but also that it's something that can be, it can be a blessing and a curse. I guess that's what that's what I'm trying to get at. So
yeah, my girlfriend took me to a store. This is an example. The neighborhood that we live in is right by Topanga Canyon, which is a well-known enclave for people to go live in a yurt and be at one, and really love that stuff. So we have some crystal shops and stuff by us. So one of my girlfriends took me to one a few weeks ago, and we started speaking with the store owner, and she was telling us about the empath thing, that she's like, we have, I didn't say anything to her about it because I always feel a bit, the fact that I'm talking to you guys about it and it's going to be on the internet is, and I swear I'm not nuts.
Well, no, but that's the whole. Yeah, that's the whole reason we're doing this. Yeah, is because people, we got stories like this, and other people we know have these stories, and we want to hear them. We want to share them because, as we've said before, you might be crazy, but so are we.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, I don't know. That's one of the things I dig about that you guys are doing this podcast, because people feel crazy thinking about this stuff, and hearing that other people who are pretty rational human beings are speaking out about it. It not only does it not make you feel so alone in your experiences, but it also takes down that stigma of, okay, maybe I'm not crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. You're talking about the crystal thing, and I can tell you straight up, that stuff is crazy. When
we the store, the lady brought it up to us and was saying that people with that type of, I guess, intuition, it's hard for them to interact with people on a daily basis. So one of the examples she gave is if you go to the grocery store and the person checking you out is going through some shit, and they give you your change and they touch your hand while they're doing it, boom. Suddenly your day was changed and you can be having the best day ever, and then you're like, man, everything sucks right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And I believe in even things, objects that have been in someone's possession that have a really shitty time, have a really rough go. if you take on that object and now you're cognizant of what that person has gone through or whatever, for me it changes things, and I have a hard time holding on to things like that. I got to let them go. Or if things that I have had in the past that I've gone through things with, you purge and you get them out because you feel like there's holding some sort of negativity.
Yeah, I feel like, and this is what I feel with the apartment that Adam and I lived in at different times. I don't think it was necessarily haunted. I think it almost is like the structure hangs on to memories. So it's almost on a loop. It's on a replay. It's on a tape.
Right.
So it's not anything that's there hanging out. It's not anything that is there coming to get you. It is a sense memory almost that the house is held to, and it occasionally will let it come and hang out.
Sure.
So yeah,
that's fascinating. You always hear of people having those types of stories, but like don't actually have real solid basis to it, and that's why it's so interesting, because when you do find someone that has a real story like that I don't know you, but you seem like a very grounded person and would have nothing to gain by talking about something that didn't happen. You know what I mean? It seems like it was real, I
mean, back then, Adam can attest to this. We were all a little out of control.
Mm-hmm, of course.
We were college
so
kids.
was I.
Right. I know. But, it was the fact that I had two other people who had their shit together, who saw things and who experienced things. And so that for me was, I'm not crazy. This isn't that I pickled my brain on, perhaps Blue Ribbon. It is that these other people are seeing this and they're corroborating it. And it's happening.
Sure.
Yeah, it's not my imagination.
Absolutely.
It's kind of terrifying, but also, yeah.
All right. So, real quick, Barry, I just realized that I had not plugged my mic in. Has my sound this whole time
it's fine.
Been good?
Yeah.
All right. Now I just plugged it in. So is there a difference?
I don't notice one.
Okay. I just realized I looked over. I've been speaking into a dead mic here the whole time.
We heard you the whole time.
So there you go. Okay. Cool. All right.
It's another ghostly encounter, maybe.
I know, right?
You speaking.
All right. So
you sound sexier.
Yeah. I'm laying it on.
That's a different podcast.
So we're looking for a little help from our friends. We need you, our loyal listeners, to help us spread the word about the What's Your Weird Story podcast. Just go to your current podcast provider, iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Podbean, YouTube. We're just about everywhere. Hit the subscribe button, download the podcast, give us a thumbs up, hit the like button, give us the highest rating you can, and give us a review. The What's Your Weird Story podcast is a community effort. Without our friends and listeners, it wouldn't be possible to do what we do. So please, help us out by spreading the word.
Okay, so back to this. So you left the apartment. I moved in and noticed nothing.
Right.
So, because clearly I am not attuned.
Right.
Which is, that may be a good thing. That may be the greatest thing ever. So, so then from that point on, I know you have more. I know you have more stories from different places that you've lived, and so go ahead and continue and give us some more. So.
Okay. Well, I moved out to Los Angeles 11 years ago, and one of the things that people don't really realize about LA is that, it was settled. It was one of, there was a huge community of First Nations people that lived here that were booted out. And there's a lot of spiritual ground still here. So there is a place on the eastern side of LA, right by Pasadena, called Eagle Rock. And it is a rock with the outline of an eagle that is in it, that has naturally occurred. And so that was one of those areas. So my now husband and I were looking for a new home, and we found this rad place that was totally affordable. So we moved in, and within the first 5 hours of moving in there, we knew we'd made a mistake. Everything that could go wrong did go wrong.
I think the fact that you were in the LA area and it was a rad place that was affordable should have been the first red flag.
I mean, at that point, but no. So the first thing that happened was everything going wrong that could go wrong. Everything kept breaking. We had a cat who was normally very shouty and all over us. And the second that we moved in, she hid under the sofa the entire time that we lived in this house, pretty much.
Wow.
In getting to know our neighbors, they informed us that couple that lived there before us would just have horrific fights, throwing things at each other, really loud, which we thought was just crazy because we weren't those people. We lived there for a little over a year. We were trying to find a place to move into that wasn't this place after about 6 months, and we just couldn't find anything. And one of the reasons why, other than the fact that it sucked, was we started arguing, and we started having these really bad, like nasty rows. We didn't throw things at each other, but we were both, I know I especially was really fucking angry all the time. I would have the best day ever, and as soon as I stepped over the threshold into that house, I wanted to kick something.
Wow.
I was really fucking angry, and I didn't know why. And it was really scary to feel that way, because you don't know why, you know?
How long before that started, after you moved in, before you started to feel that anger and hostility? A couple of weeks or immediately?
Yeah. It was a gradual thing.
Okay. So it kind of snuck up on you, and before you know it, you're just wrapped up
You're
in it.
right. You are just really angry. Yeah. And so we got out of that place, and we moved into a new place that the second we moved in, our cat was totally fine. The energy was completely different. It felt like home. The other place never felt like home. It felt like we were infringing on someone else's space.
Wow.
So the house we moved into was built in the 40s. It had one other owner other than our landlord, and they had died in it. A little old lady. And so we moved in, and it felt like really welcoming. And we, you know.
Okay, so this is not the angry house. The angry house was different, was the one.
House we'd left. And so we moved into this new house, and we ended up being there for 3 years, and we loved it. And it's the house that my husband proposed to me in the back garden, and we got married there, and we had our first child while we lived in this house. And it was amazing. However, we achieved the impossible of being able to save up and buy a house in LA.
Wow.
Dang.
Right? Shit. On our own.
That's amazing.
That's a weird story in and of itself.
But so, we started packing our house up. the way our house was configured, it was a 2-bedroom house. The smaller bedroom had been my husband's office, and we turned it into a nursery, and it was an interior room. So none of the windows looked out to the outside. They looked out into a sunroom that we'd made into my husband's office that also had blinds in it. And the baby's room had blackout blinds as well because, she's a baby. She needs to sleep.
Yeah.
So 2 weeks before we were due to move out, there were boxes that we had just put all in the sunroom. I wake up one night because I can hear my daughter sounding upset. Now, you got to keep in mind that we managed to have somewhat of a miracle baby, like a unicorn kid that sleeps soundly through the night. So hearing her, she was agitated. It was almost like she was being annoyed. And we kind of have a 10-minute rule with her. We've always had a 10-minute rule where we'll give her 10 minutes and she normally settles back down and goes back to sleep. She didn't. So I got up and I checked the monitor, the video monitor, just to see what was going on, see if maybe she'd got her arm stuck or something in the railings. And what I saw on there which it freaked me the hell out. It looked like there was someone in her room with a mag light, with a bright flashlight, shining it inside her crib and underneath her crib, going in and out.
Whoa.
Yeah. So, and she was kind of asleep, but not asleep, but she was, it was almost like she just wanted to go to sleep and wanted whatever it was to just nap off and leave her alone.
Right.
So,
yeah.
So real quick, you're looking at the baby monitor, the video baby monitor, and do you see a figure, or do you just see the light that's going around? That's like this glowing.
I just see these 2 little round circles of light.
Oh man!
So, your first thought is there's someone in a house.
Mm-hmm.
There's something outside. And then you realize there can't be something outside because she's got an interior room with, there's 2 layers of curtains there. You've got the curtains at the back of the house, and then you've got the blackout curtains in her room. There's no way any ambient light can come in.
Right.
And so my first instinct is to record it because that's what I do for a living. Get this on camera. So I recorded it, and then I went into her room, and the second I went in her room, she settled down immediately, went right to sleep. And I sat in her room for 20 minutes. She, went back to sleep, and I left. 5 minutes after I left, she started up again. And so for the next hour, I was in and out of her room. Every time I went in her room, it would stop. And finally, it just kind of chilled out. But from that point onwards, it seemed that as soon as, I don't know if, God, I feel so weird saying this and like such Looney Tunes. It's almost like the house was pissed that we were leaving. Because the house that had always felt really warm and really welcoming, and it was home, suddenly did not feel like a good place to be in.
Wow.
And so we moved out. We moved into our new house. We left some things there that I had to go back and get. And the second I stepped in the house to get the stuff, I felt like I had to get the fuck out of there as soon as possible. It was like, you just run in and get this shit. And you know what? I'm going to throw it in the trash. I don't need to put it in my car. Let's just we need to get gone. And this house had always felt so light, like literally, bright and filled with light. And it felt so dark. When I went back to it, that, I never want to go back to that house again. And it's such a bummer because we have so many good memories in there. But it was just, I don't know if it's just how Los Angeles is because it has such a crazy rich history.
That's right.
Same as it was with where we went to school. It, there was, I don't know if it's something about the barometric pressure that tends to stir this kind of stuff up,
Mm-hmm.
which again, that makes me sound like a fucking lunatic to say that. But I don't know what it is. And
had you had any outside of these experiences? You had anything growing up?
I mean, where I lived in a tiny village, half an hour outside of London in Kent, in the UK. And I lived there until I was 16 when we moved to America. And we had a church that was built in 1066 when William the Conqueror came through. So it was a farming village. And my dad's best friend had a farm, so we would go and help with the harvest all the time. And we would churn up when we were plowing the fields. We would churn up. It was flint, was the rock there. We would churn up arrowheads, flint arrowheads.
Right.
And we lived on a cul-de-sac, and at the bottom of the cul-de-sac were woods. It was this big expanse of woods. You would hear things at night in the woods. You didn't want to get in the woods by yourself. It was a weird feeling.
Sure.
It was just, and again, Chaucer's Canterbury Tales goes through the village that
Oh, really?
I grew up in. Yeah. I would tell you the name of it, but that's my Reddit handle, so I'm not going to do that.
That's interesting. So you've kind of always had those feelings. I mean, you've kind of always had that connection, right? I mean,
I guess. Yeah.
And then
so you've always been a sensitive person too, and.
Yes.
And it seems like, are you reluctantly open?
Well, yeah, because, hang on, sorry. My dogs are going to go eat some squirrels. Yeah, because first of all, it makes you feel like a nutbar.
Right.
You don't want to talk to people about it because their opinion immediately is of you, so it's also isolating.
Exactly.
But it's almost like an invasion of privacy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And it feels very unsettling because it's like sometimes you just want to relax and not think about things.
Sure.
Right.
But you're hyper aware. When you're in these environments and these situations, you can't help but be hyper aware.
Of course.
Right.
So we want to try an experiment. We want to get stories from you, the listener, for us to read on air.
What we're saying is if you don't feel comfortable being interviewed on air, you can type up your story and send it to us, and we will have it read, and we'll share your story that way.
It'll be a cross between us telling your story and our reactions to your story.
So what we'll probably do is have a third party read your stories, and we'll react as we typically do.
And we want to try this as an experiment. It's an idea that we've come up with.
Now, granted, we can't ask you the questions we would normally ask someone who is involved in the story, but we may have our reader just make up stuff.
That could be part of the charm.
And it's a little silly, but we're going to try it, and it'll be fun.
So my freshman year of college, I roomed with a stranger, as you do. And she would wake up frequently hearing me talking in my sleep. Not just normal talking in your sleep, like, pass the mashed potatoes. It was me having a one-sided, very clear conversation with somebody. And I was having dreams at the time, very vivid dreams of a girl sitting on the edge of my bed, showing me snapshots of my day and asking me about people.
Weird. And this was a recurrent dream.
Every night.
Whoa.
I was with this gal sitting on the end of my bed.
Wow.
That's intense.
Yeah, and it was a new dorm. It was one of the only dorms that had air conditioning at that time. Yeah, so it was a new. That was very unsettling, understandably so.
Yeah.
Because would ask me in the morning if I'd been on the phone because she'd woken up and heard me having a conversation. And one of the gals in our dorm was from California, and going with the whole typical Californian type stereotype, she had one of her parents was a shaman, and so she'd grown up with this kind of stuff, right?
Yeah. I'm sorry. Well, it's just the fact that you said, as soon as you said was a shaman, the dog barked in the background.
On cue.
Easy people. Of course, you're going to find that in Eastern North Carolina. But yeah, so she ended up coming into our dorm room, and she lit a bunch of white candles, and she saged me because she was like, this isn't healthy. This isn't a normal thing that happens. So I stopped having the dreams after that.
Huh.
But then I had one more dream 2 months later. And so my senior year of high school, the summer before my senior year of high school, I experienced my first death of a friend. I had a friend who was killed in a car accident. They fell asleep at the wheel, crossed the median about 40, and died. And my best friend was his girlfriend. And the year or so later, when we were in university, she told me one day that she'd had a dream that she was at her boyfriend's fraternity house at a party, and everyone kept coming up to her saying, there's a guy downstairs that knows you, there's a guy downstairs that knows you. And she went downstairs, and she sees a guy with his back to her, surrounded by people just entertaining them. And they say, this is the guy. And he turns around, and it's her ex-boyfriend, and he says, you know me, don't you? And she woke up terrified. So she tells me about this dream. A few days later, I have the exact same dream, but it's not him. It's a different guy, and he's wearing a blue crewneck sweater with a white collared shirt, dark hair. But yeah, it's a different guy. So I was thinking maybe it's because she told me about this dream.
Mm-hmm.
I'd become friends with the girl on our floor who is still one of my best friends, and it's been 20 odd years. And I went to her room to hang out with her when we were getting to know each other, and there was a photograph on her window ledge. It was a guy with dark hair wearing a blue crewneck sweater, white collar, and it was the guy I dreamed about a few nights prior. And he was her best friend, and he had been killed that summer, tripping his balls off, walking on the railroad tracks where they lived in Fayetteville. And he'd been hit. And that was,
I actually think I know that girl you're talking about.
yeah.
I think I know her, but separately from another thing, because I've heard that story.
Yeah.
That just gave me goosebumps.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's wild. That's really wild.
Like he was telling us, you guys should be friends.
Damn.
Yeah.
She's still one of my closest friends to this day. But it was a really, yeah.
That's intense.
It's crazy that you've heard that story, Adam, from someone else. But yeah. So that's nuts that you can actually corroborate.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's,
Small one?
Uh-huh.
that is crazy, man.
Oh, God. Thinking about it honestly makes me feel really physically uncomfortable.
That's crazy. That is absolutely crazy, man. That's a good one.
Yeah.
I gotta say, like, while it has its drawbacks, this feeling feelings of other people, in my job, I interview people, and I have to get them to admit things on camera that they would never admit to their closest friends.
Sure.
Which it kind of makes you feel gross at the end of the day because you're exploiting people and their life experiences for the entertainment of others. But that being able to read people thing comes into play in that because you're able to figure out what these people are going to respond to, how the best way to approach interacting with them to get them feel comfortable enough to open up to you about this stuff in a way that you're approaching it in a respectful manner with them.
Sure.
And not in a shouty, abrupt manner.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Fascinating. Yeah. Fascinating.
Man. Man.
Yeah. Crazy stuff. I gotta say that I don't know that I've known anyone that has had that many occurrences happen to them.
Well, as she said, she's very empathic. She's very attuned to this, whereas I obviously am not.
Yeah, right.
But I love hearing it. And she had so many stories. And guys, she had stories that we had to cut. We couldn't even put them on. We didn't have time. But we also just, like, for other reasons, we couldn't get them here as for the show. But man, so much good stuff.
Yeah, the video that you showed me is really creepy, man. That's the only way I can describe it.
Yeah. And like I said, we're going to try to get that and have that out for everybody to take a peek at too. And Emily, she's going to hook us up with our neighbor who I spoke to recently via the email machine, and we're going to try to get her on this, and she's got some stories too. So that will be something to look forward to. And it's cool because, it's like a lot of these stories are people we know right now, especially early on here, the people we know, but like we're networking through people we know to get more stories, and that's what it is. That's the whole thing is we want to give the stories, but we also want to build a network, a community. Yeah.
It's pretty incredible that just through who we know, all the crazy good stories that we've got.
Yeah.
And I think that's the thing is that everyone has something that they want to tell. And we've heard it time and time again. I'd love to tell that story, but man, people are going to think that I'm nuts.
Yeah, that's true.
And for whatever reason, I think because we're just open about it, people are, cool with going there, and it's good. It's neat.
It's cool because they respond to us, to the podcast and our way of doing this. But, and there's still some people out there who are like, yeah, I got a story, but I don't really want to talk. I don't want to be interviewed. So we're, that's one of the things that we're working on, where a part of this experiment that you may have heard of, where if you have a story but you don't want to be interviewed, you can write it in to us to our email or to our Facebook account and just say, I don't want to be interviewed on air, but we will have someone who will read your story and be you for funsies, and will field answers to questions and stuff like that as best they can in character of you. And so obviously they won't be completely you.
It'll be our fun take on it.
Yeah, it'll be fun. So you still get your story out. Nobody's going to know it's you. You can change the names. Don't change facts, but you can change names. And then we'll have our reader. We've got one picked out. It's a familiar voice you may have heard in the past. And it's we did some test runs on this thing. And so we think it's going to be fun. Probably we'll start off as like a special mini episode or something, and then we'll see how that goes. But yeah, that's another way we're trying to provide you access to being on the show if you don't want to literally be on the show.
Yeah, a little more content and more fun.
Yeah. Cool. Awesome. Well, thanks for listening, guys. Emily, once again, thank you so much for being on here. Thank you for the great stories. So good to catch up with you. And I think this is just going to be a stellar episode that people are going to love.
Absolutely. Hey everybody, just a quick update. We were able to obtain the video from Emily. We have it posted at the What's Your Weird Story website. That's WhatSyerdStory.com. Let us know what you think. Check it out.
As always, if you have a weird story, we want to hear it.
If you have a lot of them, we want to hear them all.
We can't do this podcast without your invaluable contributions.
Whether it's sharing your stories,
listening,
rating,
and spreading the word about the podcast. Thanks for listening. Till next time, be safe.
Be weird.
The stories presented on the What's Your Weird Story podcast are, to our knowledge, true experiences that our guests have had. We can't take the time to research all claims made, and besides, it's just not as fun.